I think I didn't do anything wrong, just told the truth about my one last night with my ex before the wedding. But this morning, a courier handed me a thick envelope, legal documents from Oliver. Now everyone's looking at me like I'm the villain, and I honestly don't understand why. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. The kitchen felt smaller than usual that Tuesday morning. Oliver stood at the counter, methodically buttering toast while I scrolled through my phone, deleting messages I didn't want him to see. The silence between us had become our new normal, though I'd convinced myself it was his fault for being so distant lately. "You were out late again last night," he said without looking up. His voice carried that same flat tone he'd been using for weeks. No accusation, just observation. It irritated me more than shouting would have. "I told you we had a deadline at the office." I kept my eyes on my phone, thumb moving quickly across the screen. Some of us can't just leave work at 3:30 every day. Oliver taught 3rd grade at the local elementary school. It was a dig I'd used before, implying his job was somehow less demanding than my position as an administrative assistant at a marketing firm. He didn't take the bait this time. "Lenora, I'm not trying to fight with you. I'm just what? Keeping tabs on me? Questioning everything I do?" I finally looked up, putting on my best wounded expression. "I can't even work late without you making it into some big conspiracy." Hazel wandered into the kitchen then, her 8-year-old face still puffy with sleep. She looked between us with those perceptive eyes that missed nothing, and I saw Oliver's expression soften immediately. "Morning, sweetheart," he said, ruffling her hair. "Want some cereal?" "Are you and Mommy fighting again?" she asked quietly. "We're not fighting," I said quickly, forcing brightness into my voice. "Daddy's just being silly, asking too many questions." Oliver's jaw tightened, but he didn't contradict me in front of Hazel. That was the thing about Oliver. He was always trying to protect everyone else's feelings, even when it meant swallowing his own concerns. My phone buzzed with a text from Elliot. "Can't stop thinking about last night. When can I see you again?" I deleted it immediately, but not before Oliver glanced over. If he saw anything, he didn't say so. "I should get going," I announced, grabbing my purse. "Big presentation today." There was no presentation. I just couldn't stand the way Oliver was looking at me, not with anger, but with something worse. Disappointment, like he was trying to figure out who I'd become. Later that evening, my mother June called while I was driving home from what had actually been drinks with some colleagues who thought my situation was perfectly reasonable. "How are things with Oliver?" she asked, though her tone suggested she already knew the answer. "He's being impossible, Mom. Suspicious and cold. I can't even breathe without him analyzing my every move." "Well, honey, maybe he senses you're not happy. Men can be so dense about these things. If he was paying you proper attention, you wouldn't need to look elsewhere for conversation and companionship." June had a way of validating my feelings that made everything seem simpler. Of course I deserved better. Of course Oliver's emotional distance was the real problem here. "I just don't know what to do," I said, pulling into our driveway. "You follow your heart, sweetheart. Life's too short to settle for someone who doesn't appreciate what they have." When I walked into the house, Oliver was helping Hazel with homework at the kitchen table. They looked up when I entered, and for a moment, I felt like an intruder in my own home. "How was the presentation?" Oliver asked. "Fine," I said quickly. "Went well." Hazel tilted her head. "Are you mad at Daddy?" The question caught me off guard. "What? No, honey. Why would you think that?" "You seem mad, and you're never home anymore." Oliver and I exchanged glances. His expression was unreadable, but I felt exposed somehow, like an 8-year-old had just seen through all my careful explanations. "Mommy's just been busy with work," I said, kissing the top of Hazel's head. "Everything's fine." But as I headed upstairs, I caught Oliver watching me with those same thoughtful, disappointed eyes. And for the first time, I wondered what exactly he was thinking. The next few days blurred together in a haze of secret texts and careful scheduling. Elliot had always been charming. It's why I dated him in college, and why I'd been so flattered when he reached out on social media 6 months ago. He made me feel alive in a way I'd forgotten was possible. "You look incredible," he said when I met him at his apartment that Thursday evening. I'd told Oliver I was working late again, and this time he hadn't even questioned it. Maybe he was finally learning to trust me, or maybe he'd just given up caring. Elliot's place was everything our suburban home wasn't. Sleek, modern, no family photos or children's artwork cluttering the surfaces. For a few hours, I could pretend I was someone else entirely. Someone without responsibilities or complicated relationships. "I've missed this," I whispered, as we lay tangled in his sheets afterward. "Missed feeling wanted." "Your husband's an idiot if he doesn't see what he has," Elliot murmured against my neck. It was exactly what I needed to hear. Validation that this wasn't my fault, that I was justified in seeking what Oliver couldn't give me. My phone buzzed on the nightstand, a text from Oliver. "When will you be home? Hazel's asking for you." The guilt was immediate and sharp, but I pushed it away. This was Oliver's fault for being so emotionally unavailable. If he'd been a better husband, I wouldn't be here. "I should go," I said, already reaching for my clothes. Elliot stretched lazily. "Stay a little longer. When's the next time we'll get to do this?" "I don't know. Soon, I hope." But even as I said it, something felt off. Elliot seemed more interested in the thrill of the affair than in me specifically. When I mentioned maybe leaving Oliver, he'd change the subject quickly. I drove home in a daze, rehearsing explanations I might need. But when I walked into the house at nearly midnight, I found Oliver sitting at the kitchen table with my phone in his hands. "You forgot this," he said quietly. "It's been buzzing all evening." My blood ran cold. I'd been so distracted leaving Elliot's apartment that I'd grabbed the wrong phone case, an old one that looked similar but didn't have my phone in it. "Oh," I said, trying to sound casual. "Thanks. The battery must have died at the office." Oliver looked down at the screen, then back at me. "Lenora, we need to talk." "About what?" I crossed my arms, immediately defensive. "And why are you holding my phone like that?" It wasn't locked. The messages, they kept coming through. My heart pounded, but I forced myself to look indignant. "So you read my private messages? That's a violation of trust, Oliver." "Is it?" His voice was still quiet, but there was something different in it now, a firmness I rarely heard. "Because I'm looking at texts from someone named Elliot, and they're not exactly professional. He's just a friend from college. We've been catching up." "Can't wait to have you in my bed again" doesn't sound like catching up. I felt cornered, which always made me lash out. "Maybe if you paid half as much attention to me as you do to your students, I wouldn't need friends to talk to. When's the last time you asked how I'm feeling? When's the last time you made me feel like a woman instead of just a roommate who happens to share your bed?" Oliver flinched like I'd slapped him. "So, this is my fault?" "I'm not saying it's anyone's fault. I'm saying marriages take work from both people, and lately it feels like I'm the only one trying." It was a masterful deflection, and I could see it working. Oliver's shoulders sagged slightly, and that familiar look of self-doubt crept into his eyes. I thought we were happy," he said. "When? When you come home exhausted and spend the evening grading papers? When you fall asleep watching TV instead of talking to me? When's the last time we went on a real date, Oliver?" Each accusation landed like I'd intended. Oliver was the type to internalize blame, to assume he was the problem. It's what had drawn me to him initially, his kindness, his willingness to put others first. Now it just felt like weakness. "I can try harder," he said finally. "We can go to counseling. We can— I don't know if I want to try anymore, I said, and for a moment I meant it. I don't know if this is what I want for the rest of my life. Oliver set my phone on the table carefully, like it might explode. What are you saying? I'm saying I need space to think. I'm saying maybe we both deserve better than this. I left him sitting there and went upstairs, feeling simultaneously powerful and hollow. In the bathroom, I stared at my reflection and practiced looking hurt instead of guilty. By morning, I'd almost convinced myself that everything I'd said was true. Sunday dinner at the Marsh family house had been a tradition for as long as Oliver and I had been together. His father, Richard, would grill something in the backyard, while his sister Sienna helped set the table, and we'd all pretend to be a normal, happy family. This Sunday felt different from the moment we walked in. Lenora. Richard nodded politely, but his usual warm smile was absent. Sienna barely looked up from arranging silverware. Everything okay? I asked, though I suspected Oliver had been talking. Just fine, Sienna said coolly. How's work been? Lots of late nights lately? The comment was pointed enough that I knew Oliver had definitely shared something. I glanced at him, but he was helping Hazel wash her hands in the kitchen sink, pointedly avoiding eye contact. Work's been busy, I said carefully. Big projects, you know how it is. Sienna's expression suggested she knew exactly how it was. During dinner, I found myself working harder than usual to seem normal. I complimented Richard's grilling, asked about Sienna's new job, made jokes that fell flat. The conversation felt stilted, like everyone was walking around a landmine. Lenora's been working so hard lately, I said at one point, trying to control the narrative. Sometimes I feel like we're ships passing in the night, you know? Oliver's so focused on his students, and I'm trying to advance my career. It's hard to find time for each other. Relationships do take work, Richard said diplomatically, but his tone was cooler than usual. Of course, some people think marriage means you can just coast, I continued, warming to my theme. But I believe both partners need to keep growing, keep challenging themselves. Sometimes that means making difficult choices about what you really want from life. Oliver's fork clinked against his plate. Lenora. What? I'm just saying that people change. We're not the same people we were 10 years ago. Sienna leaned back in her chair, studying me with undisguised dislike. No, some people definitely aren't. What's that supposed to mean? Nothing at all, she said sweetly. Just observing that some people seem to have very flexible definitions of commitment. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut. Hazel looked between the adults with worried eyes, clearly sensing the undercurrents she couldn't understand. Maybe we should talk about something else, Oliver said quietly. Good idea, I agreed quickly. Hazel, tell Grandpa about your art project. But the damage was done. For the rest of the meal, I felt like I was performing for a hostile audience. Every comment felt loaded, every silence felt accusatory. When Oliver stood up abruptly during dessert, I thought he was going to defend me. Instead, he said, I think we should go. I need some time to think about things. Oliver, Richard started. It's fine, Dad. I need to process some things. Come on, Hazel. As we gathered our things to leave, I caught Sienna whispering something to her father. They both looked at me with expressions I'd never seen before. Not just disappointment, but something closer to disgust. In the car, the silence was deafening. Well, that was uncomfortable, I said, trying to sound casual. Oliver didn't respond. He drove with his hands gripped tight on the steering wheel, jaw clenched. Your sister was completely out of line, I continued. I don't know what you told them, but I told them the truth, Oliver said quietly. Which is what, exactly? That my wife is having an affair and blaming me for it. The words hung in the air like a slap. In the back seat, Hazel pretended to be asleep, but I could tell she was listening. I'm not. Please don't lie anymore, Oliver said. I can't take any more lies. When we got home, Oliver took Hazel upstairs for her bath while I sat in the living room, scrolling through my phone. I had 3 missed calls from my mother and a text from Maya asking if everything was okay. I called June back. How was dinner? She asked. Awful. Oliver's family is treating me like a pariah. They're all ganging up on me because Oliver's been telling stories. What kind of stories? I gave her a carefully edited version. Oliver was being paranoid and controlling, reading my private messages, turning his family against me. I was just trying to maintain friendships, but he was making everything into something sordid. That sounds like emotional abuse, June said immediately. Isolating you from friends, monitoring your communications. Maybe you should think about whether this marriage is healthy for you, sweetheart. It was exactly what I needed to hear. By the time I hung up, I felt justified again. Oliver was the problem. His family was the problem. I was just a woman trying to find happiness in a suffocating situation. But later that night, lying in bed while Oliver slept on the couch downstairs, I couldn't shake the image of Hazel's worried face at dinner, or the way Richard had looked at me, not with anger, but with profound disappointment. For just a moment I wondered if everyone else could see something I couldn't. Then I pushed the thought away. They didn't understand the full situation. They didn't know how lonely I'd been, how neglected I'd felt. I was the victim here. I just needed to make sure everyone else understood that too. The call came on a Wednesday morning while I was at work. Oliver's voice was calm, almost businesslike. Can you meet me for coffee after work? We need to talk. Something in his tone made my stomach drop. About what? About us. About what happens next. I spent the rest of the day rehearsing what I'd say. I'd been thinking about this conversation for weeks, imagining how it would go. Oliver would be emotional, probably angry. He'd accuse me of things, and I'd explain how his neglect had driven me to seek connection elsewhere. We'd fight, maybe dramatically, and then we'd either work it out, or we wouldn't. What I didn't expect was the man sitting across from me at Corner Cafe that evening. Oliver looked tired but composed, like he'd already made peace with whatever he was about to say. I know about Elliot, he said without preamble. My heart hammered, but I forced myself to look confused. What about him? I know you're sleeping with him. I know it's been going on for months. I know you've been lying to me about working late. The words hung between us. I could deny it. I could deflect. I could blame him for snooping. Instead, I found myself saying, okay. Oliver blinked, clearly not expecting that response. Okay, I repeated, sitting back in my chair. Yes, I've been seeing Elliot. But Oliver, you have to understand, I don't, actually. Our marriage has been dead for years. We're like roommates. When's the last time you looked at me, really looked at me, like you wanted me? Oliver's face remained impassive. So you decided to have an affair. I decided to find someone who made me feel alive again. Someone who saw me as more than just a mother and a housekeeper. I was warming up now, falling into the speech I'd been preparing. Do you know what it's like to feel invisible in your own marriage? To watch your husband care more about his students than his wife? I tried to talk to you about it, but you were always too tired, too busy, too focused on everyone else. When did you try to talk to me? The question caught me off guard. What? When did you try to talk to me about feeling neglected? Because I've been going through our conversations in my head, and I can't remember a single time you said you were unhappy. I shouldn't have to spell it out for you, Oliver. A good husband pays attention. A good wife doesn't cheat. His voice was still calm, which was somehow worse than if he'd been shouting. I felt tears welling up, partly genuine, partly strategic. It was just one night, I lied. One mistake. I was lonely and confused, and Elliot was there, and it just happened. I never meant for it to mean anything. Oliver reached into his jacket and pulled out a stack of papers. I have screenshots of your text conversations going back 4 months. I have credit card receipts from the hotel you went to last Tuesday. I have ride-share records showing trips to his apartment. My mouth went dry. You've been spying on me? I've been trying to understand why my wife became a stranger. Oliver, please. We can work through this. People make mistakes. We can go to counseling. I can't trust you anymore, Lenora, and I can't pretend this is something we can fix with therapy. He stood up, leaving a $5 bill on the table for his untouched coffee. Where are you going? Home to pack some things. I'm staying at my dad's for a while. What about Hazel? What about her? You can't just leave. She needs stability. Oliver turned back to me, and for the first time I saw real anger flash in his eyes. She needs parents who respect each other enough not to destroy their family for a few months of excitement. After he left, I sat in the cafe for another hour, cycling through emotions. Anger at his self-righteousness, panic about what this meant for my future, relief that I didn't have to sneak around anymore. But underneath it all was something I didn't want to acknowledge. The sinking realization that Oliver wasn't going to fight for me. He wasn't going to beg me to choose him over Elliot. He was just done. I called Elliot on the drive home. Oliver knows, I said when he answered. Shit. What did you tell him? The truth. Well, part of it. He has evidence, Elliot. Screenshots and receipts and everything. There was a long pause. That's really intense, Lenora. I think I'm going to leave him. Another pause, longer this time. Wow, that's a big decision. I mean, what's the point of staying now? He'll never trust me again, and honestly, I don't think I want to be married to someone so rigid and unforgiving. Right, Elliot said, but something in his voice had changed. Listen, I'm actually seeing someone tonight, but we should definitely talk about this soon. Seeing someone? Like for work? No, like, I'm dating someone else, Lenora. I thought you knew this was just casual. The words hit me like a physical blow. Casual? I mean, you're married. I assumed you weren't looking for anything serious. I hung up on him and sat in my driveway, staring at my dark house. Oliver's car was gone. Through the front window, I could see Hazel watching TV alone. For the first time since this all started, I wondered what exactly I'd been fighting for. The certified letter arrived at my office on a Friday morning, delivered by a courier who made me sign 3 different forms. I knew what it was before I opened it, but seeing the legal letterhead still felt like a punch to the gut. Petition for dissolution of marriage and motion for temporary custody. Oliver wasn't just leaving me. He was taking Hazel. I called him immediately, my hands shaking as I dialed. You can't do this, I said the moment he answered. I'm doing what's best for Hazel. By ripping her away from her mother, by destroying her sense of security. Her sense of security was destroyed when her mother decided to have an affair. His voice was still that same calm, measured tone that had become so infuriating. I'm trying to minimize the damage. Oliver, please. We can work this out. We don't need lawyers involved. Actually, we do. My attorney says... Your attorney? I felt hysteria creeping into my voice. When did you get an attorney? Last week, after I realized you weren't going to stop lying. The accusation stung because it was true. Even after he'd confronted me with evidence, I'd continued to minimize and deflect, but that wasn't the point now. I'm not giving up my daughter. I'm not asking you to. I'm asking for primary custody while we work through the divorce. You'll have visitation rights. Visitation rights? She's my child, Oliver. She's our child, and she's been asking why Mommy is never home anymore. She's been having nightmares. She asked me yesterday if it was her fault that we fight all the time. The words hit harder than any accusation of infidelity. That's not... I never meant for her to be affected. But she is affected. She's 8 years old, and her world is falling apart, and she doesn't understand why. I sank into my desk chair, staring at the legal documents spread in front of me. What do you want from me? I want you to think about what's best for Hazel instead of what's most convenient for you. After he hung up, I called my mother. He's trying to steal my baby, I sobbed into the phone. That bastard, June said immediately. Don't you worry, sweetheart. No judge is going to take a little girl away from her mother. We'll fight this. But when I met with my own attorney the following Monday, his assessment was less optimistic. Your husband has documented evidence of the affair, he said, flipping through the papers Oliver's lawyer had sent. Text messages, financial records, witness statements from family members who observed behavioral changes. That doesn't make me an unfit mother. No, but it does establish a pattern of deception and prioritizing personal relationships over family stability. Combined with your increased absences from home, I was working. Were you? Because his documentation suggests otherwise. I felt the walls closing in. So, what are my options? We can fight it, but honestly, your best bet might be to negotiate a reasonable custody arrangement and focus on rebuilding your relationship with your daughter. That evening, I drove to Richard's house where Oliver and Hazel were staying. I could see them through the kitchen window, Oliver helping Hazel with homework while Richard cooked dinner. They looked like a complete family without me. When Oliver answered the door, his expression was guarded. I want to see Hazel. She's doing homework. She's my daughter. I have a right to see her. Oliver stepped aside, but I could feel his reluctance. In the kitchen, Hazel looked up when I entered, and my heart broke a little at the uncertainty in her eyes. Hi, baby, I said, sitting beside her. How was school? Okay, she said quietly, not quite meeting my gaze. I miss you. Do you miss me? Hazel glanced at Oliver, then back at me. Are you and Daddy getting divorced? The question hung in the air. I looked at Oliver, who was watching us with an expression I couldn't read. We're working some things out, I said carefully. Emma's parents got divorced, Hazel said. She has to go back and forth between houses now. She says it's confusing. Well, no matter what happens, Daddy and I both love you very much. Then why can't you just stop fighting? It was such a simple question, asked with the devastating logic of childhood. Why couldn't we just stop fighting? Why couldn't I just choose my family over whatever I thought I was looking for with Elliot? But it was too late for simple answers now. Sometimes grown-ups have problems that are hard to fix, I said finally. Hazel nodded solemnly, then returned to her homework. I stayed for another hour, but the conversation never found its rhythm again. When I left, Hazel hugged me goodbye, but it felt different. Careful, like she was already protecting herself from whatever came next. In the car, I called Maya. How bad is it? She asked without preamble. Pretty bad. Oliver's going for primary custody. Maya was quiet for a long moment. Lenora, can I ask you something? Of course. What did you think was going to happen? What do you mean? I mean, did you think Oliver would just accept this? Did you think there wouldn't be consequences? I felt defensive immediately. I thought he'd fight for our marriage. I thought he'd want to work things out. By doing what? Pretending you didn't cheat on him? Pretending he didn't find months of evidence that you've been lying to him? Whose side are you on? I'm on Hazel's side, Maya said quietly. And honestly, Lenora, I'm tired of pretending this is all Oliver's fault. The line went dead. I sat in Richard's driveway, staring at the warm light spilling from the windows, and realized I'd never felt more alone in my life. The family court hearing was scheduled for a Tuesday morning in November. I'd spent weeks preparing with my attorney, crafting explanations and justifications, but walking into that sterile courtroom, I felt completely unprepared for what was about to happen. Oliver sat at the plaintiff's table with his lawyer, a sharp-looking woman in her 50s who'd apparently specialized in cases like ours. He was wearing his good suit, the navy one he'd worn to our wedding, and for a moment I felt a stab of something that might have been regret. Judge Patricia Hendricks was a stern-faced woman who looked like she'd heard every excuse in the book. She reviewed our case files with the expression of someone who found the whole situation tediously familiar. "Mrs. Vane," she said, addressing me by my maiden name, which I'd started using again. "I've reviewed the evidence presented by your husband's counsel. Do you dispute the documented evidence of your extramarital affair?" My attorney had coached me on this. "Your Honor, I made a mistake during a difficult period in my marriage. I take full responsibility for that mistake, but I don't believe it affects my ability to be a good mother to my daughter." "I see. And how long did this mistake continue?" I swallowed hard. "Several months." "During which time you repeatedly lied to your husband about your whereabouts, used family resources to conduct this affair, and were frequently absent from your family home during evening hours when your daughter was present." Each word felt like a nail in a coffin I'd built myself. I was trying to work through some personal issues by committing adultery. "Your Honor," my attorney interjected, "my client was dealing with feelings of neglect and emotional distance in her marriage." Judge Hendricks held up a hand. "Counselor, I'm not interested in relitigating the marriage. I'm interested in what's best for the minor child." She turned to Oliver. "Mr. Marsh, you're seeking primary physical custody with supervised visitation for the mother. That's quite severe. Can you explain your reasoning?" Oliver stood, and when he spoke, his voice was steady but not vindictive. "Your Honor, my primary concern is Hazel's stability and emotional well-being. Over the past several months, she's exhibited signs of anxiety and confusion related to the tension in our home. She's asked me repeatedly why her mother is never home, why we argue, and whether she's somehow responsible for our problems." He paused, glancing at me briefly before continuing. "I believe Hazel needs consistency and honesty right now. I'm not trying to punish my wife or keep her from our daughter. I'm trying to create an environment where Hazel feels secure while we all adjust to this new reality." "And you believe supervised visitation is necessary?" "I believe structure is necessary. My wife has demonstrated a pattern of prioritizing her personal desires over family stability. I want to ensure that Hazel's needs come first during this transition." Judge Hendricks turned back to me. "Mrs. Vane, how do you respond to these concerns?" I stood on shaking legs. This was my moment to make my case, to explain how I was the victim of a cold marriage and an unforgiving husband. But looking at Oliver, remembering Hazel's uncertain face the last time I'd seen her, the words I'd prepared seemed hollow. "I love my daughter," I said finally. "I made mistakes in my marriage, but I never stopped loving Hazel." "Love isn't in question here," Judge Hendricks said. "Judgment is." She spent another 20 minutes reviewing the evidence Oliver's attorney had presented. Bank statements showing expenditures related to my affair. Screenshots of text messages where I'd explicitly lied about my whereabouts. A statement from Hazel's teacher noting behavioral changes and anxiety. When my attorney tried to present character witnesses, my mother, a few friends from work, Judge Hendricks seemed unimpressed by their testimony that I was going through a difficult time and deserved happiness. "Mrs. Vane," the judge said finally, "I'm going to be frank with you. You made a series of choices that prioritized your personal gratification over your family's well-being. You lied repeatedly to your husband and, by extension, to your daughter about your activities and whereabouts. You used family resources to conduct an extramarital affair, and you've shown little genuine accountability for the impact of these choices on your child." I felt tears starting, but they felt different now. Not strategic or manipulative, just the raw realization of what I'd lost. "However," Judge Hendricks continued, "I don't believe supervised visitation is necessary at this time. Mr. Marsh, I'm granting you primary physical custody, but Mrs. Vane will have unsupervised visitation every other weekend and one evening per week, with the understanding that this arrangement will be reviewed in 6 months. It wasn't the worst possible outcome, but it felt devastating nonetheless. As the judge finalized the details of our divorce decree, Oliver would keep the house, I'd pay child support, we'd split other assets according to a formula that heavily favored the wronged party. I found myself thinking about the moment this had all started. When had I decided that my temporary happiness was worth more than my daughter's security? When had I convinced myself that Oliver's quiet steadiness was neglect rather than stability? After the hearing, I watched Oliver leave the courthouse with his head held high, flanked by his father and sister. They looked relieved, like a weight had been lifted. I realized I wasn't part of that family anymore. I'd chosen not to be. My mother waited for me outside, ready with comfort and righteous indignation about the unfairness of it all. But for the first time in months, I didn't want to hear it. "I need to go," I said. "Where?" "I need to figure out how to be the mother Hazel deserves." It was the first completely honest thing I'd said in a very long time. Walking to my car alone, I thought about the woman I'd been when Oliver and I first met. She wouldn't have recognized the person I'd become, the lies, the justifications, the willingness to sacrifice everyone else's happiness for my own momentary satisfaction. Maybe it wasn't too late to find her again. Maybe I could still be someone my daughter could be proud of. But first, I had to stop pretending I was the victim of this story. I had to start living with the consequences of being its author. The afternoon sun felt harsh on my face as I drove away from the courthouse, but for the first time in months, I wasn't running toward something else. I was just trying to find my way home to the person I used to be. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and turn on the bell so you don't miss the next story. Write in the comments from which city you are watching.